So that's a choice you got to make economically and where you stand socially. If you want to be on a platform or if you want to be, you know, in this capitalist society. So you got to make a choice. But I feel like Master P said, if we had our own platforms, then you don't have to really be so like the minister. They tried to, mute Minister Farrakhan, took him off of social media, still found a way to broadcast, and he don't have to answer nobody, so he can say exactly what's on his mind. And I think as a black person, you should be able to do that in any person.
Absolutely. And I think that we're starting to take steps to move toward that direction. Little by little in 2020, you're starting to see ownership, not only in media and music and in the brick and mortars and in plumbing, anything when it comes to black, you're starting to see more and more. And it's a beautiful thing. You're also a Chicago native, been out there for a long time doing your thing. Shout out to Chicago. Yeah. We see how rich it is in culture, but obviously through the mainstream media, it has a real negative connotation. Can you just walk us through the history of Chicago from when you were a young man growing up to where it is now?
Well, the way I grew up, man, in a community, in a neighborhood, and there were families. And so basically, we went from Woodlawn area to the Beverly area, which was the better area. But there were all families that migrated, and so we had community, and we had last names. Everybody knew about the Johnsons, the Dunbars, the McDowells, the Williams, the Fosters. And it was parents. It was 2-parent households, and they were blue collar workers, who moved up, and that was that migration. Now you don't really see that. We don't really know our neighbors, so it's not as communal. But it's not as bad as it's being portrayed in the media. The violence that's taking place in Chicago is really cliquish, and it's more personal confrontation. So it's not like you come to Chicago, you got to worry about getting shot on any corner. This guy's mad at that guy, or these guys did something to these guys' buddies, and now they're retaliating. So it's this vicious cycle of retaliation taking place. It's very unfortunate that there's no way that we don't have organized gangs, if we're gonna say that, because that's what it used to be. That could kind of stifle this, or something. If a kid got hit by mistake, or if somebody robbed an old lady coming out of bingo, it was people to check them for that. Now it's just these small cliques, and they wilding and they violent, and that's not just Chicago. That's all over America. Anywhere you got poverty and lack of opportunity, you're gonna have crime and violence. So Chicago, we just happen to be in the lead as far as the media is concerned. So that's my take on that right off the top.
Right. You've seen Terry Crews. I think he was on CNN maybe a couple of days ago last week speaking on violence in Chicago and how we need to first fix black on black crime before we can deal with systematic racism. And he took a lot of heat for that. Obviously, people are upset at him about that. How do you feel about Terry Crews' approach? Because you got one aspect of black people that think one way, another aspect that thinks another, and there doesn't seem to be any real middle ground. So where's your take on what Terry Crews had to say about that?
Well, I was once in his frame of mind, like briefly, but I was uninformed. The term black on black crime is, it's misused. It's a media tool to basically demonize us as a community. What about black on black crime? You're worried about the police. So crime is crime, to be honest. And there's no such thing as white on white crime, and white people commit crimes against each other all the time. So that black on black crime thing, I like to take that out the equation. As far as systemic versus personal, as I stated about Chicago, it's a totally different thing. We live in a violent society. This country was founded on violence. It got its independence through uprising, through the back in the day for the Tea Party and such. So for you to try to compare the two, it's not logical to me, and I don't agree with this statement.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, what do you think it's going to take? Because we always talk here on the platform about that ownership aspect, but it seems like rappers and actors, they stay confined to a certain area, the liquor, the clothing, but you rarely ever see them branching out and getting credit unions, banks, different things like that, where they can redistribute the wealth to their people. What is it going to take for us to do what Master P was saying? Because I listened to him and it was 100% on point, accurate. What is it going to take for black people to really get power in this country? Because we see all the other people got power. We lack power.
Well, I think the activists and those in this moment, we're in a huge moment, man. This is the first time that this type of movement was felt worldwide. 16 other countries or 18 other countries protested during the George Floyd situation. So that's a worldwide global awakening. So I think this young generation going forward, they're teaching each other cooperative marketing. They're learning how to, work the soil, and be organic. And So I think the next generation is really, I'm hopeful for how it's going because we're forced to now definitely deal with our circumstances head on because it's no alternative. They've shown us through redlining and um, Jim Crow and everything that they're not trying to give black people a fair shake. So it's up for us to make it better for us, and I think it's in that head in that direction. Just because we have these platforms and this ability to intermingle and link online, even is I think it's very helpful to where we headed.
Absolutely. And you're one of them. You're one of them comedians that obviously you may not be in the mainstream and known in every living room in today's age, but people who really know comedy, you're respected, you're well known, and you're well known for giving other comics opportunities, bringing them on, getting them on shows, booking them, and giving them opportunity where it wasn't usually given. Can you give us a little history on how you began to get into comedy, and then once you realized you had your foot in the door, the responsibility you had to help others get in the game as well?
Man, it's it seems like it's just a natural thing to do. Once you find a way to hit a lick, you're supposed to share that with your people, especially if it's not detrimental to you. So when I got to Comic View, it was like really the first big break for me, and I found out the process of what it took for comedians to get on Comic View. So by me having a streamlined direct contact, I united all the comedians in Chicago and said, instead of doing what I did, which was send in my individual tape and hope they pick it, let's send them a Chicago tape. Then they can pick. That way they don't have to go through a whole bunch of tapes. So this is back in the 90s. And they picked 20, 22 people, 24 people. So it was gratifying to be able to call a guy and say, look, I just got the call, man. BET, they're going to hook you up. Marlon Mitchell, Marcus Combs, D. Ray Davis. These are people that, Lil Rel, all these cats. Well, Lil Rel maybe came around behind D. Ray. But cats that got that opportunity. And it was just a good feeling. So when it became apparent that in order to make money in this business, you have to be an entrepreneur and a promoter as well, unless you're a household name, as you stated. I started promoting shows. And then a lot of people say you need to leave Chicago, go to LA or New York to make it. But I felt like they had it backwards because Chicago is a market that people also want to come to. Mm-hmm. So I took advantage of that by bringing artists in. And I learned that, if I book a name act, and I'm not a known name person myself, but I host my own show and I'm the promoter, then I'm going to absorb some of their fan base. So that worked in my favor. And I spread that philosophy. And I just felt like, as a promoter, I need comics that have notable names. So it was in my benefit to make them all popping so that when they do my shows, they sell tickets. So it all was, it just was organic and it worked.
Who were some of your influences that you looked up to before you got in the game?
Before the game, of course, it's two people. That's Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy. If anybody don't mention Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy when they talk about doing black comedy, then they're probably lying or they're not doing it well, because those are the two that really made it happen. Red Fox is also a pioneer. I also like Franklin Ajay. These are people that I looked up to before I got into the industry. Once I started, doing my thing, my mentor was George Wilborn here in Chicago. He was the house MC of the preeminent comedy club in America for blacks called All Jokes Aside here in Chicago. And so everybody came through there, Chappelle, Rock, Steve Harvey, All Four Kings, people like Monique when she was on the rise, all of them, this was the spot, Michael Collier. These are people that I became, cool with and got influence from. So George Wilborn, Bernie Mac were my two people in Chicago that really steered me through this game. And the owner of All Jokes Aside, I always have to mention him, Raymond Lambert.
Dope. Now you talk about Chicago comics. I mean, how did y'all, like you D-Ray, you, Bernie, my man Corey Holcomb, and I'm missing a million of them.
Oh yeah, Deion Cole, Lil Rel. Let's just keep going. T. Murphy's out here doing it. Just Niche, Adele Givens, Cheryl Underwood, Melanie Camacho, Rodney Perry, D. Cole. I'm not done. Hannibal Buress, Wanda, what's her name? Marsha Warfield from Night Court. I'm talking about. Actually, Red Fox was born in St. Louis, but he learned to be a comic in Chicago. He was from Chicago as far as that goes. Richard Pryor up the street in Peoria. So Illinois and Chicago has a rich history. Then we have, on the mainstream side, Second City is here. So a lot of people flow through there to go to Saturday Night Live. Chris Red on Saturday Night Live, Chicago. So the Chicago comedy circuit, man, we kind of bred comics. I think Chicago, DC, and probably Atlanta, other than the two coasts, are the, places where you have an epicenter of comics and you have a circuit where you challenge each other. But Chicago, man, I'm just very proud of this circuit and the people and how we've mentored each other coming up generation after generation. And this is a hot spot. If you want, I put our squad up against anybody.
Yeah,